You wouldn't think that that would be a problem. Blood doesn't cross the placental barrier, but the thing is, antibodies do. And if you're a mom, you may be aware that your baby doesn't get sick right away. You know, baby's born, it goes a few weeks before it starts beginning to get snotty, poopy, nasty. You know. And during that time, what's going on is that during the pregnancy, antibodies that you make against everything that you've ever been exposed to cross the placental barrier, get into baby's blood, and protect the baby as well. Antibodies are relatively short lived. Now, and over the course of a few weeks or months, either they wear out or they get used up. And that's when your baby starts getting sick. Now, the reason this isn't permanent is you've never activated the baby's immune system. So initially, it's not exposed to it. It can be exposed to stuff, but it's not going to make its own antibodies. It has to get sick later on. So, mom's antibodies, or mom's body now is making antibodies against the Rh factor. She's had her first baby, which is Rh positive. She gets pregnant a second time, and this baby is also Rh positive. Well, the antibodies can cross the placental barrier and get into the baby's bloodstream, and then they can start destroying the baby's red blood cells. This condition, actually, there's a couple of terms. There's hemolytic disease of the newborn, and in that situation, the baby has survived. It has been delivered, but it's really, really anemic because mom's body's been destroying those red blood cells all along. There's also erythroblastosis fetalis. You could call it erythroblastosis fatalis. Essentially, in this situation, there's been enough of the antibodies cross the bloodstream that it's actually killed the baby. And so, when I was young, there was someone, a couple in our neighborhood, that had one child. And, you know, mom got pregnant many, many times after that, but she could not carry it to term. So within the first month or so of her pregnancy, she would spontaneously abort. Now, most likely, what was going on is that mom was Rh negative, dad was Rh positive, dad was giving his genes to the baby, and so the baby was Rh positive. And as a result, mom's body was killing the baby. This was probably pretty common at one time. There were no doubt lots of people who only had one child. And quite likely that mom's body was just destroying the child after that. This can be avoided now. There is a substance called RhoGAM, and in a sense it acts like an artificial antibody. It will bind to the Rh factor in baby's blood and prevent mom's body from ever recognizing that there is this weird factor that can allow mom to have additional babies if she wants to. Not exactly sure why anybody would want to have another child after having one, but nonetheless, that is what the RhoGAM will allow. As I was editing this, I realized that I had not specified that this RhoGAM is given to the mom, and it may be given during the course of pregnancy. It will certainly be given after the child is delivered. Now, over time, it's still possible that this would not work, just because every time mom delivers a baby, there's a small chance that exposure could happen. Other things that you need to work on. You'll need to watch the videos on heart anatomy, be able to identify the major structures of the heart. I will give a test or quiz online in a few days, which will allow you to identify various structures of the heart. It's going to ask you questions about Rh blood types, so I'll probably have some trays with reactions that have occurred in them, and we will have also blood vessels, and I have all of those things linked for you to look at in the lab unit. So thank you much. Now I'm going to show you some illustrations, do some drawing here that will hopefully explain the genetics of blood typing and the genetics of the Rh factor. I'm going to take a few moments and try to explain how we get our different blood types. So if we have, this is called a Punnett square. It is something that we use to describe some simple genetic outcomes. And for every trait that you have a gene that you got from dad and a gene that you got from mom. If dad had type A B blood and mom had type A B blood, there's actually several combinations that can arise. Now, these two, A and B, are called codominant. That is, if you have a gene for either of those characteristics, it's going to manifest itself, and it can do it this way. If dad gives the A gene and mom gives the A gene, that child's going to have type A blood. If dad gives the A gene and mom gives the B gene, that child will have type AB blood. Same thing here. If mom gives the A and dad gives the B, you've still got AB blood. And if you go here and both give the B gene, that child's going to have type B blood. Now, O, on the other hand, is a recessive trait. And so if we have this same thing, say you have mom who has type A blood, but she has the recessive gene. What happens here is that while she's got the gene for A, it's still going to generate type A blood because that's recessive. Same thing with type B blood with dad. So we end up with some possible gene combinations here. Mom can give A, dad can give B, and you end up with AB blood. Mom can give O, and dad can give B, and that's going to be type B blood phenotypically. When we say phenotype, we're talking about how something looks, but genotypically, it's going to have the gene for B, the gene for O. And over here, we can have A and O, so that kid's going to have type A blood. And if you get the two recessive genes for O, that's when you get type O blood. So to get type O blood, you have to have received the O gene from both parents. Now, Rh factor is much the same, and let me slide that just a little bit, in that if you have the gene for the Rh factor, you're going to be Rh positive. So say dad is Rh positive, but he has a recessive gene for the minus, or Rh negative. Say mom also is the same way. She's Rh positive, but she has a recessive gene for the negative as well. Well, most of their children are going to come out Rh positive, because we're going to have plus plus, We're going to have plus minus. That is still Rh positive. This will be plus minus, still Rh positive. This would be Rh negative. Now, when we're talking about problems with an Rh negative mom, let's say that we still have a dad who is Rh positive with a recessive gene. And we have a mom that is negative. Well, in this case, the baby is going to be positive most of the time, well, half of the time. The other half of the time, you're going to end up with the two negative genes. So if the dad has a Rh negative gene, there's a 50-50 chance that the children will be Rh negative, provided there is an Rh negative mom. But if dad has two of the dominant type genes, now, no matter what, there's going to be an Rh positive baby. End result is that if mom is recessive and dad is Rh positive and he has both dominant genes, then what will happen is that every baby that she has is going to be genetically Rh positive, which means that if the blood can cross the placental barrier, this child, this mom in the future, after having been exposed to blood after the first pregnancy, is going to start making antibodies, and those antibodies will go in and destroy those red blood cells. While we are at it, I want to explain a little bit about antibodies. Say I've got all of these different blood cells, and I have the A antigen on the blood cell. Well, what I'm going to have is the B antibodies floating out in the plasma. I can't have the A antibodies because if I did, that would end up attacking my own blood cells. Same thing here. If we have B, then we're going to have A antibodies. If we have a child that has both A and B on the cells, we can't have any antibodies out here. And if we have a cell that has no antigens, that is type O blood, then what's going to happen is it's going to have both A and B antibodies floating around in the plasma. And it is that interaction between antibodies in the plasma and antigens on the cell that determine what blood types you can give to one another. I should also note that in the reading on this, they talk, instead of antigens and antibodies, they talk about agglutinins and agglutinogens. And agglutinins is their term for antibodies, and agglutinogens, the term for antigen. Hopefully, this has helped you a little bit.